Chief Obori lived in the town of Adiego, on the right bank of the Calabar River. He was a wealthy and powerful chief, a proud member of the Egbo society, and feared as much as he was respected. His compound was always alive with noise. Drums in the evening, shouting slaves in the morning, and the constant creaking of giant canoes being loaded for trade. He owned many large canoes, each commanded by a head slave and powered by 8 paddlers. These were no ordinary journeys. Each canoe was packed tightly with new yams, sometimes so heavily loaded that the water lapped only inches below the edges. At times, 3 puncheons of palm oil were also stacked inside, making every trip a dangerous gamble with the river itself. Each canoe was worth 800 rods, an enormous fortune. When the trading season came, about 10 canoes would push off together like a small floating army, cutting through narrow creeks that wound through thick mangrove swamps. The air was heavy and still, broken only by the rhythmic pounding of paddles and the cries of the men urging each other on. But the river was not their only enemy. During tornado season, the creeks turned violent without warning. Winds would scream through the mangroves, whipping the water into sudden waves that crashed into the overloaded canoes. More than once, a canoe would tilt dangerously, men shouting in panic as water poured in faster than it could be bailed out. Some were lost forever, dragged under in the chaos or taken by the huge alligators that lurked just beneath the dark surface, waiting for weakness. Still, the traders pushed on. After 4 grueling days of relentless paddling, exhausted and soaked, they would finally reach Rio del Rey. There, the danger did not end. It simply changed shape. Traders bargained fiercely, exchanging yams for dried shrimps and smoked fish sticks, shouting over one another in the crowded trading grounds where tempers were short and trust was even shorter. Chief Obori had 2 sons, Ao I and Esido. After their mother died when they were infants, the boys were raised under their father's strict watch. But as they grew, it became clear they were headed toward completely different destinies. Ao I, the elder, was quiet, disciplined, and relentless. He worked like a man who feared hunger itself, spending long days in the canoes and even longer nights planning trade routes. Esido, however, lived like the river in flood, fast, loud, and uncontrolled. He loved dancing, feasting, and the attention of the towns. Where Ao I saved, Esido spent without hesitation. When Chief Obori died, everything changed. According to custom, Ao I inherited everything. But despite this, he showed mercy and divided wealth with his younger brother, giving him rods, land, and a house. For a moment, it seemed like Esido might change. He did not. Instead, Esido threw a celebration so wild it echoed through the town for days. Drums beat until dawn, wine flowed like river water, and strangers filled his compound. Within months, his fortune began to vanish. Within years, it was gone completely. He sold his house, then his land, then anything left of value, each sale feeding another night of reckless celebration. Meanwhile, Ao I grew stronger than ever. His canoes multiplied. His trade routes expanded. Soon he had fleets on the river every week, returning from Rio del Rey loaded with goods. Markets began to rely on him. Wealth followed him like a shadow. One evening, as thunder rolled far off over the mangroves, Esido arrived at his brother's compound, no longer dressed like a wealthy man, but like someone defeated by his own choices. "I need help," he said quietly. "Lend me 2,000 rods." Aoi looked at him for a long time. There was no anger in his eyes, only disappointment. "No," he said firmly, "I will not give you money to continue a life that destroys you. But if you are willing to work, I will give you a share of everything I earn." Esido's pride exploded. "Work?" he shouted. You would make me a servant in my own family's shadow?" And with that he turned and stormed out into the night. But outside the wind had changed. The river was rising. The same waters that once carried their father's wealth now roared like a warning. Something in Esido's life was about to crash, and this time there might be no canoe strong enough to carry him through it. Esido left his brother's compound that night with anger burning in his chest. The storm had fully arrived now, wind tearing through the palms, rain falling so hard the earth turned into a river of mud. He did not go home. He could not. There was nothing left there except emptiness and shame. Instead, he walked straight toward the river. For the first time in his life, Esido saw the Calabar River not as a place of pleasure or trade, but as something alive and dangerous. Canoes groaned against their ropes. Men shouted warnings about the rising tide. Yet in his desperation, he approached a group of traders preparing for a risky night journey to Rio del Rey. They laughed when they saw him. "You? The chief's son who never worked a day in his life." But Esido, with nothing left to lose, begged for passage. Finally, an old paddle master agreed on one condition: he would work like everyone else, no excuses. That night, Esido held a paddle for the first time in his life. His hands blistered, his arms shook. The river mocked him with every wave, but something inside him broke, not his body but his pride. And once it broke, he could finally begin to learn. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Esido did not return home. He traveled instead, first to Rio del Rey, then further along trading routes his father never used. He learned how to read the sky before storms, how to balance a canoe, how to bargain without wasting wealth, and how to survive hunger without panic. Slowly he changed. One season, while trading deep in the mangrove creeks, Esido and his crew were caught in a violent tornado storm. Canoes flipped. Men screamed. The river became a wall of black water. In the chaos, Esido saw something terrifying. Another overloaded canoe drifting without control, heading straight for a submerged log. Without thinking, he dove into action, guiding his own canoe through the storm to help. He threw ropes, pulled strangers to safety, and even risked his life to save the head slave of a rival trader. By dawn, half the fleet was destroyed, but Esido's leadership had saved many lives. News of this new Esido spread quickly. Months later, he returned to Adiago, not in shame, but as a respected trader with his own small fleet. The same townspeople who once mocked him now watched in silence as he walked through the gates. But when he reached his brother's compound, he froze. Ao I was gone. The compound was empty. Only an old head slave remained, trembling as he handed Esido a sealed bundle. Inside was a ledger. Ao I had secretly been saving part of his wealth for years, not for himself, but for Esido. Every time Esido had wasted money in the past, Ao I had quietly bought back land and stored rods under hidden accounts in Rio del Rey. Everything Esido thought he had lost had never truly disappeared. At the bottom of the ledger was a final note. "I refuse to feed your weakness, but I never stopped believing you could become strong." Esido stood frozen. Then the twist came. The head slave spoke quietly. "Your brother left for Rio del Rey 3 moons ago. His last canoe never returned. People say it was caught in the worst storm the river has seen in years." Esido's heart tightened. Without hesitation, he gathered his crew. For 3 days and nights, he searched the mangrove creeks, refusing sleep, refusing fear. And on the 4th dawn, deep in a collapsed swamp channel, he found it. A broken canoe, half submerged, its cargo still intact, and inside it, alive but weak, was Ao I. His brother had survived, but only barely, trapped after saving his fleet from disaster. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ao the First smiled faintly. "So," he whispered, "you finally learned how to survive the river." Esido laughed through tears. "And you finally learned you don't have to do everything alone." From that season onward, the two brothers ruled not as divided heirs, but as partners. One with wisdom and patience, the other with courage forged in hardship. Their fleet became the strongest along the Calabar River. And the twist the townspeople spoke about for years was this: the brother, who once wasted everything, ended up saving the man who secretly saved him all along.